The smell of grilled steak and charcoal drifted through the warm summer air as laughter echoed across the neighborhood cul-de-sac. Expensive SUVs and polished luxury sedans lined both sides of the street while perfectly dressed couples gathered beneath glowing string lights in the Harper family's backyard. Music played softly from hidden outdoor speakers, mixing with the sound of glasses clinking and people bragging about vacations, investments, and new home renovations. I stood quietly near the entrance gate for a moment, adjusting the sleeves of my old button-up shirt while holding the homemade peach cobbler I had spent hours baking the night before. Compared to everyone else, I looked painfully ordinary. Most of the men wore designer polos and expensive watches. The women carried handbags that probably cost more than my truck. My old pickup sat half a block away because I didn't want it parked beside the newer luxury vehicles. Rust showed near the back bumper, and the air conditioner barely worked anymore, but it still got me where I needed to go. Around here, though, people noticed things like that. As soon as I walked through the gate, conversation started slowing down. Not completely, just enough for me to feel it. Mrs. Harper spotted me first. She stood beside the outdoor bar wearing a sparkling white dress while holding a glass of wine. Her smile tightened the second she saw me approaching. "Well," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "look who actually showed up." A few people turned toward me with awkward smiles. I handed her the cobbler dish politely. "Thanks for inviting me." She looked down at the dessert for a second before forcing a laugh. "Homemade. That's sweet." The way she said sweet felt more like an insult than a compliment. Before I could answer, one of the men near the grill chuckled and said, "Honestly, we thought you disappeared after that business of yours failed." Another neighbor laughed. "Yeah, we thought you were broke." Several people around them burst into quiet laughter while pretending to sip their drinks. I smiled weakly like it didn't bother me, but the embarrassment crawled up my neck like heat. They didn't know anything about me anymore. They only remembered the old version of my life, the guy who worked endless hours, kept to himself, and never tried showing off. "Mrs. Harper tilted her head slightly. You still driving that old truck?" "Yeah," I answered calmly. She exchanged a glance with her husband before smirking. "You know, my son wanted to donate money to you last Christmas because he thought you were struggling." More laughter. Someone behind me whispered, "I heard he rents that tiny house near the highway." Another voice added, "Probably drowning in debt." I looked around the backyard at the massive outdoor kitchen, the heated pool, and the expensive furniture imported from Italy that Mrs. Harper constantly bragged about online. Everyone there seemed obsessed with proving how successful they were. Every conversation felt like a competition disguised as friendliness. Meanwhile, I had spent the last 3 years hiding everything. The late-night meetings, the private investors, the property I quietly bought overlooking the ocean, the architects flying in from New York, the construction project hidden behind secured gates outside the city. While they spent years trying to impress each other with kitchen remodels and leased luxury cars, I had been building something none of them could even imagine. But standing there with people laughing around me, I kept my expression calm and took another sip of lemonade like their words meant nothing at all. For days after the neighborhood barbecue, the whispers continued spreading through the community like wildfire. Every time someone passed me while walking their dog or checking the mail, I caught the same judgmental expressions. Some looked at me with pity. Others looked amused. A few barely acknowledged me at all. Around this neighborhood, people measured success by appearances, and according to them, I ranked near the bottom. Then, on Thursday morning, something unusual happened. Every house on the street received the exact same envelope. Thick black paper, gold lettering, no return address. The invitations were hand-delivered sometime before sunrise, left carefully beneath each front door like something from a movie. By noon, the entire neighborhood Facebook group exploded with speculation. Did everyone get this? Who owns that address? Is this some celebrity event? I watched the online comments quietly from my kitchen table while sipping coffee. Nobody recognized the location printed on the invitation because the property had remained hidden behind private gates for years during construction. At exactly 7 o'clock Saturday evening, a long line of luxury vehicles crawled up the winding coastal road outside the city. The guests followed GPS directions deeper into the hills until massive iron gates finally appeared beneath towering palm trees illuminated by golden lights. Valets dressed in black suits waited beside the entrance. People inside the cars stared through their windows in disbelief. Beyond the gates stood one of the most breathtaking homes any of them had ever seen. The mansion stretched across the cliffside like a modern palace made of glass and stone. Giant reflecting pools shimmered beneath floating staircases while waterfalls poured gently beside perfectly sculpted gardens. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowed warmly against the dark evening sky, revealing sparkling chandeliers and towering ceilings inside. Mrs. Harper stepped out of her Mercedes slowly, completely speechless for once in her life. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her husband stared at the estate with wide eyes. "This place has to belong to a billionaire." Luxury cars continued arriving behind them while guests gathered near the entrance, taking photos and whispering excitedly among themselves. One man shook his head in disbelief. "This house is easily worth 10 million. Probably more," another replied. Soft piano music drifted through hidden outdoor speakers while servers carrying silver trays welcomed everyone inside with champagne. Nobody could stop staring at the architecture. Every detail looked straight out of an international design magazine. The neighborhood guests became more confused with every passing second. Why had they been invited? Who was hosting this? And why did the invitation list only include people from their neighborhood? Mrs. Harper adjusted her necklace nervously as she climbed the marble staircase leading toward the main entrance. "Maybe the owner is trying to network with influential people," she said, though her voice lacked confidence. That was when the massive front doors slowly opened. The conversation stopped instantly. Footsteps echoed across the polished stone floor as I walked outside wearing a tailored black suit and a silver watch reflecting beneath the lights. I looked completely different from the man who arrived at the barbecue carrying homemade dessert in an old pickup truck. For several seconds, nobody said a single word. Mrs. Harper's mouth slowly fell open. One of the neighbors blinked repeatedly like he genuinely thought he was hallucinating. "You," someone whispered. I gave a calm smile while looking across the crowd standing frozen in disbelief. "Welcome," I said softly. "I'm glad all of you could make it tonight." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything they had said about me at the barbecue. The silence followed me as I turned and walked back through the enormous front entrance, and slowly, the guests began trailing behind me like people stepping into another world. Their expensive shoes clicked against polished Italian marble while soft golden light reflected from the towering crystal chandeliers above. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered jokes. The same neighbors who mocked me only days earlier now looked completely overwhelmed. Mrs. Harper entered first, clutching her purse tightly against her side as her eyes moved across the massive living room. The entire back wall of the mansion was made of glass, revealing a breathtaking ocean view stretching endlessly into the dark horizon. A floating staircase curved upward beneath hanging gardens suspended from the ceiling, while modern artwork lined the stone walls beside softly glowing fireplaces. "Oh my God," one woman muttered under her breath. Another man slowly turned in circles. "This place looks like a five-star resort." Professional servers moved quietly through the room carrying champagne and appetizers while live piano music echoed from somewhere deeper inside the mansion. Every detail had been carefully designed, from the imported wood panels to the custom lighting hidden beneath the floors. Mrs. Harper finally looked directly at me again. Her face had completely changed. The smug confidence from the barbecue was gone, replaced by confusion and disbelief. This is your house?" she asked carefully. I nodded once. "Yeah." Her husband stared at me for several seconds before laughing nervously. "Wait, seriously, I bought the property 3 years ago," I explained calmly. "Construction finished earlier this spring." Nobody knew how to respond. A few guests exchanged awkward looks while slowly realizing how badly they had misjudged me. The same people who assumed I was struggling financially were now standing inside one of the most luxurious homes they had ever seen. One neighbor stepped closer to the glass wall overlooking the infinity pool and whispered, "This must have cost a fortune." "Just over 10 million, I answered casually. Several people nearly choked on their drinks. The reactions became impossible to hide now. Some guests looked embarrassed. Others suddenly became overly friendly, speaking to me with forced smiles and fake enthusiasm. A man who ignored me for years suddenly placed a hand on my shoulder. "I always knew you were smart." Another laughed awkwardly. "Guess you had us all fooled." I smiled politely but didn't answer. Deep down, I remembered every single comment from the barbecue. The old truck jokes, the whispers about debt, the pity in their voices. Now those same people stood inside my home trying desperately to rewrite history. Mrs. Harper slowly walked toward the grand piano near the center of the room. Her fingers lightly touched the glossy surface as she looked around again in disbelief. "But, what do you even do?" she asked quietly. "I sold my software company last year," I replied. Most of the deal stayed private. The room fell silent again. One of the younger couples exchanged stunned looks. "You owned a tech company?" "For almost 8 years. Nobody had known because I never talked about it. While everyone else spent years competing over appearances and social status, I stayed quiet and focused on work." Suddenly, giant television screens mounted along the walls flickered on automatically. The guests turned toward them as dramatic cinematic footage of the mansion filled the screens, aerial drone shots, interior walkthroughs, and interviews with famous architects. Then a narrator's voice echoed through the room. "Greater than, tonight we explore one of the most stunning private residences in America, a hidden $10 million masterpiece designed for entrepreneur Daniel Carter." Several people gasped softly. The logo of a major luxury architecture network appeared across the screen while scenes of the mansion played in breathtaking detail. Mrs. Harper stared at me with a completely pale face as the realization finally settled over the entire room. The neighborhood changed after that night. For weeks, nobody talked about anything else. Every morning, people slowed their cars near the gated road leading toward my property, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mansion perched above the coastline. Social media became flooded with blurry photos secretly taken from passing vehicles, while local gossip spread faster than ever before. The same neighbors who once ignored me suddenly waved whenever they saw me in public. Some even tried starting conversations at grocery stores or coffee shops, acting as if we had always been friends. The shift in their behavior felt almost unreal. Mrs. Harper became unusually quiet after the gala. The woman who once dominated every neighborhood gathering now avoided eye contact whenever our paths crossed. Her husband, meanwhile, began mentioning real estate investments every chance he got, almost like he was trying to prove he belonged in the same world as me. Then, 1 month later, everything escalated again. Early Saturday morning, black SUVs and production vans started arriving outside the neighborhood entrance. Cameramen unloaded equipment onto sidewalks while reporters gathered near the security gates leading to my estate. Residents stepped outside their homes in confusion, staring at the sudden media frenzy unfolding right in front of them. Nobody understood what was happening until copies of the newest issue of Dwell magazine began appearing online. The cover featured a full aerial photo of my mansion glowing at sunset above the ocean cliffs. Across the front page, bold white letters read, "Greater than, the hidden millionaire next door." Within hours, the article exploded across social media. Luxury design blogs reposted it. Architecture channels reacted to it. Influencers called it one of the most beautiful private homes in America. The magazine revealed details nobody in the neighborhood had ever imagined: the imported materials from Italy, the underground garage, the private theater, the infinity edge rooftop pool, and the custom-built glass bridge connecting both wings of the mansion. By afternoon, cars were lining up near the coastal road again. Not because of gossip this time. Because people wanted photos. I stood inside my office overlooking the ocean while helicopters occasionally circled overhead capturing footage for news stations. My phone buzzed nonstop with interview requests, business offers, and messages from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Then the front gate intercom rang. When security informed me Mrs. Harper was outside asking to speak with me, I paused for several seconds before finally agreeing. She entered the property slowly, looking noticeably nervous as she walked through the massive entrance hall. Gone was the confident woman who mocked me at the barbecue. Today, she looked uncomfortable even standing there. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said quietly. "You're fine," I replied calmly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes moved around the room again, almost overwhelmed by the scale of everything surrounding her. Finally, she sighed softly. We judged you completely wrong. I leaned against the marble counter without answering. She looked down at her hands. People around here, we get caught up in appearances. We thought because you stayed quiet and drove an old truck that you weren't successful. I know what you thought, I said calmly. Her face tightened with embarrassment. I'm sorry, she whispered. Outside the giant glass windows behind her, photographers gathered near the distant gates hoping for another glimpse of the now famous mansion. News helicopters continued circling above the coastline while luxury magazines fought for exclusive interviews. The entire neighborhood that once laughed at me now stood watching from the outside.